the next thing, we're going to move into a new session, a new topic here for the rest of the morning. And so we're going to talk now about planting techniques. So Brett Blank with South Dakota Game Fish and Parks and Joe Blastick with the Nature Conservancy are going to give us some techniques for seeding into cropland.
So Brett and I decided we're going to split this up a little bit to kind of break up the monotony. So I'm going to start off first here. This is one of the interseedings or one of the restorations. This is what we're going for, right? So the real challenge we're facing here is folks who working with landowners who have a monoculture of something, and then we want to turn it over to a diverse planting. So what are the steps? You know, it's not a snap your fingers and this stuff happens overnight type of a deal. I got to say, when I was looking for pictures for this slide, my portion of the crop side really made me sad because all I was doing was Googling pictures of corn and beans and those sorts of things. So from the people working with landowners, your perspective, you get these excited landowners that want to work with you, and you want to work with them, and it's not just overnight, we're going to get to the end goal, across the finish line. So you really got to stop and assess what you're working with. So if you get the call and you get meeting with your landowner and you're looking at corn, the one thing we're talking about here, and we're kind of comparing pros and cons, this is based on all of our management over years with lots of different things. So it's our perspectives. What are the pros and what are the cons when you see corn? The big thing is there's better ways of doing things and there's maybe not so perfect ways of doing things, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just knowing what your alternatives are. Corn leaves a lot of residue, right? That's the big thing that we kind of get worried about. So if we're going to be successful working with a cornfield, removing that residue so you get the seed-to-soil contact is kind of what we're saying is really important. Different parts of the state, you have different accessibility to getting rid of some of that debris, whether it's grazing or baling up. So it's kind of what's in your neighborhood. One of the hang-ups with corn is all the stalks. When we're talking about drilling, the stalks can create problems, so that's kind of an important thing to consider. Cover crops, this might kind of contradict a little bit what we heard yesterday. From our experience, cover crops is a little bit more of a challenge, and while you can do it, there's also kind of a negative side effect to it. We talked about the nurse crops, and what we're kind of seeing with some of these plots that we've done, or restorations we've done, is it might actually slow down the process of getting your restoration to take off, and it still involves another round of spraying to kill off your nurse crop. But there is pros, right? You get the soil health. There is a forage component to it, so if you can work with that side of things, you can. But you also have a layer of vegetation kind of covering up your seeds and maybe even producing a little bit of competition. This came up yesterday with the allelopathic traits. Small grains, I think Owen and Brett have had more experience than I have with this one, is you hear a lot of don't do it, but when you do, you can be successful. So if you have a landowner that's got winter wheat and you have the ability to move on it, you can, but just know there's a little bit of a risk that it might not come out as great as fast. Again, there's a lot of residue. If you have the stubble, that allows for some moisture catch in the fall and in the wintertime, so that's good. But the bigger thing I think that we kind of decided was there's a little bit of a risk, and it's up to you to kind of weigh that risk with your landowner and figure out what direction you want to go. Generally speaking, across the world of doing restorations, I think the preference is soybeans, mostly because you can plant right into the residue. We've had a lot of success with it. On the flip side, when you're working with soybeans, you're actually adding nitrogen back to the soil. Hands could be good or bad either way. And the other thing with soybeans is sometimes that'll plug up your drills and cause problems. So you don't want to go in the wetter soils with your drills and then have to fight clogged planters. Alfalfa. If you're dealing with alfalfa, do everything you can to kill it. Alfalfa is one of these really weird things that when you try to plant it, You can't get it to grow, but if you're trying to kill it, you can't kill it. I've had numerous restorations over the years where we've tried to work with it that have involved spraying multiple times, breaking the soil, spraying it again, and it just comes back. It's quite amazing, actually. Now, from the prairie purist standpoint, it's the devil plant. From the practical side of of a restoration, like there's a flowering plant. It's not the end of the world, but it can get competitive and outcompete your desirable species. So if you have a little bit, like I said, it's okay to roll with the punches on it. But I think you just have to really try to manage it on the front end to give your species you're planting a good shot. So that was my sucky part of dealing with the crop side. Brett gets to talk about the fun stuff of the management.
Okay, post-harvest management actions. Here's where we're just kind of talking about, like you said, whatever you're going to be planting into the crop that was planted there for that year. The biggest, the first thing you want to start with is the removal of that debris, whatever's laying on your field, trying to clean that up as good as you can, just because that's going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to the actual planting of your native seed mix. So, as you see on the top there, like Joe said, you got some corn stalks. I would advise have your local farmer, whoever it is, go in there and bale them stalks up. You can see on that top picture there, a lot easier to run your drill through this stuff right here where you can actually see some soil versus down here you can see on an unbaled harvested field, all those stalks and all that litter and debris that you've got to try to get your drill through. You just got a way better chance of plugging your drill up. So also as far as if you can get a termination spray in the fall, obviously it depends on kind of how the fall goes, and if you get any sort of a green up afterwards after harvest, if you see some little stuff growing in there, go in there with glyphosate and go ahead and kill that off, and then just that's less you got to battle coming into the next spring. In planting, obviously you want seed to soil contact. That's why we're cleaning everything up. As you can see up here, you want to give that seed that you're putting in the ground the best chance to grow, and obviously so we want to have contact with the soil as we're planting. Site prep on your crop ground here. Unworked ground is preferred just because that provides you a better seed bed for when you are going to do your native planting. Unlike on this bottom picture here, you can see on the worked ground here, we're going to get great seed to soil contact, but the thing we got to kind of worry about that, especially if you're going to be drilling, is we don't want to be putting our seed into the ground too deep. We plant too deep and we might not get very good germination come in the spring if you're doing a fall planting. Vice versa, I don't think we've ever really done it on worked ground like this. Whoops. But you could do an overseed on that, and obviously you're going to get pretty good seed to soil contact. But the other thing is you can kind of see the clumps of the grass and everything out here. It's going to be rough going over, and it's going to be pretty rough even come that next spring. So this piece down here was actually broken farmed for a while, and just for that, just to level things out and provide a better seed bed. Less ground disturbance, the better. Obviously, everybody knows as soon as you disturb the soil, what's the first thing that's going to come back? The weed seeds that are in there. So every time you turn that soil over a little bit, you're going to have something germinate that you probably don't want. So at the end, go in there, harvest your crop, clean it up as good as you can, removing that debris, and then go in there and you're ready to plant. Some of the seeding equipment. Broadcaster right here, this is a simple Vicon. It's a fertilizer spreader actually that fits in the back of our UTV, and we use that quite often for overseeding, both on crop ground and some of the sod seeding that Owen will be talking about here later. Essentially, fill this hopper up with your seed. It's got a little pendulum right here. You can see that in a gas motor on there fired up. That thing just flails back and forth, works your seed through there and throws it out onto the ground. Good way to get a planting done in a short amount of time versus, say a drill. So a lot quicker, you can cover a lot more ground. And this works real good for your bulk seed versus, a drill, you're not gonna get that to go through there, but if you are harvesting some bulk seed, throw it in the Vicon here, and we came to find out too, if you get some bungee straps and run them in there, and as that thing is sitting there twisting like this, then bungee straps kind of help break things up so it don't plug up with the stems and whatnot. So it's just a little tip if you're going to use one of those. Drop seeder, we don't have any experience with those, but you still kind of see those around, you know, even driving around the countryside. Every once in a while you see a farm site, it's got a drop seeder in the back. I don't know, Joe, have you guys used drop seeders in the past a little bit?
Colleagues in Nebraska.
Yeah, so I don't have any experience with the actual drop seeders, but just another tool that you can use. And the no drill here, or the no-till drill, the True-Ax, that's what we run here out at the Watertown office are the True-Ax ones. They work great. The nice thing about them is you know, you can use them later in the year. You know, if you got some frozen ground, they're heavy enough that they'll cut that soil, get you some good seed to soil contact. So those are kind of your three options there as far as when it comes to seeding. Pros and cons of the drill. A lot of your conservation districts do have them available. So if you know you're in need of a drill and you want some help planting, a lot of times you can get a hold of your conservation districts and you can borrow them to get your seed in the ground. Purchase mixes are easier to calibrate. Actually, I would recommend the only thing you put through these drills are purchase seed, just because they're clean. If you got any trash whatsoever, you're going to be dealing with it's going to throw off your calibration rates in there, and you're not going to get the correct amount of seed actually going through there, and it's just things are going to plug up. It's not going to flow correct. So if you are going to do a drill, make sure that you either have really, really clean seed, or at best just use the purchase seed. They do have 3 different boxes on here. Your front is usually your really small hard seed, legume type seeds that you can put in there, and then the middle box is your warm season, your fluffy box they call it, and then your back is your cool season box. We've got to the point where we just throw everything in this cool season box back here, and we calibrate it. Everything seems to run fine through it. So we just mix everything totally together, put it in that back box, calibrate it, and away you go. More precise, you know, like you said, we just talked about calibration on the drills. You can calibrate them down to, you know, 7 pounds, 8 pounds, 9 pounds, whatever you want to get. You can calibrate those things to kind of hone in on what you want for pounds per acre. Some of the cons for the drill: time limited on planting. You know, obviously, if your conditions are too wet, you can't run the drill. You're going to be sticky, plug up. So you got to have the right conditions, and it also takes you a little bit longer to plant versus a Vicon, so a little more time spent in the field. They can be finicky. You know, we've had times where you go in there and we calibrate it, and then you start running over the field. It should be about right, and you get to the end, and you know you got a whole bunch of seed left in the box or whatever. So you got to just kind of keep going. So they're not. You can, you know, the precision on them. You can calibrate them out, but then you kind of get to the end, and you're like, all right, I calibrated, but I still got seed left in my box. But quite frankly, you just turn around and maybe you just start cross-hatching and go until your seed's gone. So a little bit slower, obviously. Most of the time, I think they recommend on planting speed for these are in that 4 to 7 mile an hour range. So it is a little bit slower than flying around out there on your Vicon. More to haul around. You got to have the tractor and the drill up on your trailer if you got to haul or get to your spot out in the field somewhere. So you got to load that stuff up, which takes time and can plug up while planting. If you don't have the right conditions, or if you got too much trash on the field, you're going to have problems plugging up while you're planting. The broadcaster, the Vicon that I was showing you, the pros, it's fast. I mean, you can get that stuff in there and you can fly around on the field and you can seed, you know, 10, 20, 30 acres in a pretty short amount of time. You have a greater opportunity to do it, more time to do it, just a greater window. You know, you can do this all throughout the whole winter time, whereas with a drill, you get 6 inches of snow on the ground, you're shut down for your drill. You get 6 inches of snow on the ground for your broadcaster, and you actually got a prime opportunity to do it. Don't need a tractor, a little bit cheaper. It's not going to cost you near as much as what a drill would. And more likely to capitalize on soil moisture, because when you do want to broadcast, a lot of times you want some snow on the ground just for the mere fact of you can see where you're seeding, versus if you try to do that, you know, just on regular dirt, it's pretty tough to see your seed. So you actually want to have some snow on the ground when you're going to go seed, and obviously that allows you to capitalize on that soil moisture when it does melt. Some of the cons, less precise. With a drill, you're following right where your last pass was. Sometimes when you're out there seeding with the broadcaster, you're dealing with a little bit of wind, so your seed's blowing. You might not have perfect coverage, but you're gonna be pretty good on it. With purchased seeds, it is easy to run out just because they're so clean. That's one thing that you got to watch when you're using the broadcasters. And just right below it, they're significantly easier to use with the hold my beer strategy. You have somebody that's kind of watching it, because if you're going over, if you got everything in there in your hopper is for the whole planting, and you're halfway across it, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I better check and see how much seed I got left, and you look in the Vicon and you only got a quarter of it left, you're kind of SOL. You got, all of a sudden you got a heavy side of your planting, you're going to have a light side of your planting. We actually had that happen with one of our guys. He went out, and that was a mistake on their half, though, where they didn't calibrate it correctly. There's an adjustment under there, tells you how far your opening is, and he actually told the intern that it was calibrated, and he made about 2 passes, had to seed about 8 acres, and made 2 passes with it, and called me up and said, we got a problem, I'm out of seed. Well, it was open, he had it calibrated to where it was opened all the way versus maybe a quarter of the way. So you just got to make sure that you know how to use the Vicon spreader or your broadcaster too. Some recommend increased rates of 1.5 times over your drill. Like Owen said, I think yesterday, we pretty much just keep it the same. But they do, there is a recommendation out there to put a little more seed on the ground if you are broadcasting. When to plant? Fall, winter, that's kind of our shot that we go at, I guess, as far as if we have a choice to plant, we're looking at the fall. With the drill, typically you want to have, probably right around that 40 degree or less, our dormant seeding. We don't want to plant it too early to get some germination if we do get a warm fall. And then we've got a small seedling goes into winter and would get winter killed. Broadcast anytime, basically anytime after harvest. Kind of the same thing though, you want to wait until, it's getting a little bit cooler out. The nice thing about the broadcaster is, you're looking after fall, you're late October till you got all winter, as long as you can get out there. The only thing that's really going to stop you is if you have probably too much snow to where you just can't get through. But it gives you a way bigger window. Fall allows for the most potential for soil moisture. If you get it planted in late October, November, December, the chances are you're going to catch some moisture over the winter time or right away in the spring, and your seed's already out there. Larger window for planting, the fall, winter, you got many months to do it. Springtime is difficult depending on your soil conditions. If you come into the springtime, might be looking good, like last year would have been a prime example up in the Northeast. We were pretty dry in March, and all of a sudden April, May kicked in, and it seemed like we were getting rain almost every week. So you'd get to the point where you might have a day or two maybe to get out there and seed. Otherwise, it was too wet. So springtime, you kind of take a chance on whether you're going to have the right conditions to get out there. The muddy conditions, like you said, depending on what your site looks like. If you've got any of these low wetland type areas on your seeding, a lot of times these could be wet in the springtime just from waiting for that soil to be absorbed, or the water to be absorbed into the soil. Like you said, you may have a window, you may not. That's the chance you take on a spring, especially if you're going to be drilling. Obviously, you got to have the right conditions, otherwise you're going to have a headache if you're trying to force it into a muddy situation. It's going to turn into a large headache. And the other thing with spring is no guarantee on moisture after planting. If you get it in late season, you better hope it rains, probably within a week or so of that, at least as soon as you get it into the ground. Sometimes you might get a thunderstorm come by, sometimes you don't. If you put it in the ground and it's laying there for quite some time and you don't get any moisture, it's definitely going to affect your planting. So, and like it says on the bottom, restorations don't grow in bags. Sitting on the seed waiting for perfect conditions can yield to not getting done. So bottom line is if you've got the right situation, the right time, don't wait on it. Just go out there and get it done, get it in the ground. If it's sitting in your garage or in the barn, it's not gonna grow. If you got it out onto the ground, you at least give it a chance. So I think that's it. Sometimes you can use snow geese even to help you plant, I guess. But if anybody's got any questions about that, they could talk to Pete maybe. Any questions? Yep. I don't think so. I don't think they make.
Can you repeat the question?
Yep. So he asked on the Vicon spreader, the broadcaster, he had said that he didn't think that Vicon made them anymore. And I don't think that Vicon makes them, but Kubota makes that spreader anymore. Yep. So yeah, it's essentially it's a fertilizer spreader is what it is. But they work great for doing seedings like this. So you still can find them out there. Yep.
Yeah. Do you guys want to talk at all about the difference or any opinions on the pendulum action versus the rotary?
We've never, I don't think we've ever dealt with the rotary ones. I guess on the only thing we've done on some small scale ones, but that was more of a food plot, overseeding a food plot versus the pendulum. That pendulum, I would say, you probably get about I would say on a calm day, if you had to average it, it's probably about a 30 foot swath, by the time so it throws the seed pretty good, but the nice thing is you can go up and down in a Ranger, you can fly on those things and you can go, 10 to 15 mile an hour pretty easy, so you can seed. But yeah, I mean the overall dispersal of the seed is pretty good.
I think the pendulum allows you to handle the stemmy stuff better too.
How would you mitigate wind erosion if you're taking corn stalks and corn residue off of the field that you're prepping for planting?
So the question was, how do you mitigate wind erosion? And I have a great example because I got pictures from last winter of a site we did with a big old dust cloud coming off one of our sites. Short-term loss, long-term gain in some of these sorts of things. We're not talking of doing sections all at one time. I will say when I got that picture of that particular site, I was like, oh, buckets, what are we losing? And the seed we actually threw out there stuck. So when you think of wind and all that matter in the air, these prairie seeds are really good about staying on the ground, getting in cracks and crevices. And my fear of potentially losing valuable seed went away pretty fast. Actually came up really good the following year. But I think scale is really important. I don't see huge restorations in scale, at least for what we do.
All things equal, would you prefer no storing in soybean stubble or corn stubble that has residue removed? I talked about the nitrogen.
So the question was, do you prefer corn stubble with everything removed or soybean stubble? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, if you're going into soybeans, it's actually nice even if you can, we talk about residue and kind of the soil principles and how important it is to have residue on there, to retain soil moisture and whatnot. But I would actually, if I'm going to go into bean stubble, I would almost prefer if I could find somebody to bale the residue off of there, just because it'll save you a headache from, we found, drilling into beans, you still plug up quite a bit. Especially if you're doing kind of a late fall, you get that early morning frost on there, you kind of wait till things to dry up, but there's still moisture in there, and you seem to plug up your drill quite a bit. Corn stalks, I mean, if you got a baled cornfield, I guess for me, there's not really a preference as long as that residue. I'm more looking at the ease of, am I not going to have any headaches of when I'm planting, so if I can get that residue off of a bean or corn stalk, I mean, you look at a cornfield, I guess, yeah, maybe you're hopefully pulling some of that nitrogen out of there versus the bean stubble, the beans fixing nitrogen for that year, but I'd say between the two of them, I don't know if we've really noticed a huge difference as far as a success of a planting. You got any experience in that?
It seems like soybeans were always a standard for a long time. And that's just what everybody kind of rolled with. It's easy to work with. most of the time for Nature Conservancy projects, we're just broadcasting. And broadcasting in the beans was just easier for that freeze thaw cycle to let that seed work its way into the ground. So that would be my experience.
With the Truax drill, planting in the bean stubble, I've dealt with some moisture issues before, and the back wheels are awesome. You need to I always just take some weight off the drill, and it usually solves all my floating problems. When you have all the weight on the drill on that stubble, it picks it up really bad.
Yep.
Taking all the weight off of the back wheels seems to work really well.
And typically, when you have those issues, it's usually not the whole drill itself. It's usually like one or two that are just causing you issues. Yep. And I've got to the point where you get so frustrated where you take the scrapers off for the day and you're like, screw it, we're gonna go and we're gonna get it planted, because if I keep getting out once every pass to try to clean this thing off, I'm never gonna get it done too. So typically, and sometimes if you keep the maintenance up on them drills a little bit better, make sure your scrapers are in good shape and whatnot, and that'll go a long ways too.
Brett, can you repeat what he said too?
He was just talking about on the Truax drill there, if you've seen on those on the back wheels there, you can adjust those. So he was just saying he just lifts that drill up a little bit to take that weight off of the actual coulters where they're planting there. So it takes that weight off instead of laying all the way down onto the surface.
And from the producer side, if you're working with your conservation districts, there's far more drills across South Dakota than there are broadcast seeders. That's good. The drills are kind of the standard.
Yep.